everyone, me and Buster Green here, and I'm a guy making my own anime, and every week I review Gundam Witcher Mercury, but unfortunately I'm not doing that this week, because unfortunately some mysterious situation in the island of Japan has delayed the release of Gundam Witcher Mercury episode 17. This happened like once or twice in season 1-2, mostly a couple of health scares with Mika Nakamura's voice actor. Nobody knows what happened, but the popular guess is she had COVID. But yeah, so anyway, last week episode 16 dropped, and while I'll try not to spoil the broader strokes of the episode if you haven't seen it, Prospera went batshit crazy and had a really intense horror movie moment where she grabbed Mirin by the ear and gaslit her and changed up topics on her and told her that she wants to kill her dad because she hears ghosts telling her to do it. The fanbase went batshit nuts for this because this was seemingly the most evil thing she's ever done on the show up to now. Some stranger online said after the fact that Prospera in 16 showed how batshit insane she was, and that's something we've only seen from one other Char clone, Raul Crusette, and that makes her and him the best Char clones ever because they took the original Char's traits and dialed them up to 11. But that being the case, let's talk about that. Let's talk today about the main character of Gundam, Char Aznable, and how throughout the years, every single Gundam series has had a clone of him in some way or another. Spoilers ahead for the entire Gundam franchise from beginning to end. By the way, I'm only 360 hours from monetizing my YouTube channel, so yeah, that's not much, is it? Anyway, so let's talk about Char Aznable. In the original 70s Gundam, we got a lot of cool new concepts in the table because the original Gundam broke a lot of barriers and redefined anime forever with the first real robot story as opposed to a super robot story. But one of the biggest developments in that story was the character of Char Aznable. Because prior to 1972, all villains in anime were these ugly fat monster things. You had your typical fat bastards, your insane old men reeking of piss and death, your occasional transgender gay person, your occasional German Nazi. But in 1972, we started to see more cool villains, more villains who were handsome and sympathetic, and these sort of cool, interesting rival characters with this demeanor started to pop up, starting with Saburo, Hokkaider, and Kakaider, and from there we started to see more and more evil Bishonen characters rising up through the course of your mecha super robot anime. Anyway, that eventually brings us to Char Aznable. Char Aznable is the main antagonist and rival in Gundam, but not actually the villain, at least not in the original Gundam. Char is known for having a red mobile suit and being a rival with Amuro, and in Tomino's original Gundam novel, Char is ironically the hero in the end, taking over for Amuro after he's killed, and ending up in the Char custom Gundam to rally the white-based crew against his sworn enemy, Giran Zabi, the man who is somehow responsible for killing his father. Actually, it was his dad, but we're going to blame Giran because Giran's an asshole. Anyway, Char is a lot of things. Char is a combination of the classic literature man in a mask trope with the classic samurai trope of the kingdomless prince. The trope of the kingdomless prince is a character who by all accounts is a prince, but unfortunately, for one reason or another, is the prince of nowhere, a prince of nothing. This trope is very common in samurai stories, but it doesn't come up that often in anime. The only times I can really think of it in anime are Char and Prince Ashitaka from Princess Mononoke. But yeah, so Char's major arc in the original Mobile Suit Gundam is he's just this sheer force of nature against the Zabi family, who he blames for killing his family, and so therefore he's decided to kill them all to restore his family's prosperity. And at this point his family is all dead except for he and his sister, but over the course of the anime, Char's failure in battle with the Gundam incredibly distracts him from his lifelong goal of revenge against the Zabi family. And there's this particular scene I love that's been cut from the original Gundam, where basically Giran gives Char a medal for his hard work fighting the Gundam in the 1 Year War. And then after the fact, Char goes into the bathroom and has a nervous breakdown over the fact that he was so focused and so trying so hard to defeat the Gundam that he's become admired by the man he hates most in the world and the very man he wants nothing more than to kill. Anyway, Char is MIA at the end of Mobile Suit Gundam, but I think the movie version shows him fleeing on a ship to Axis. The original Gundam ends with Char having killed most of the entire Zabi family, and now he's one step closer to taking back control over the Principality of Zeon, which unfortunately no longer exists because of the end of the war. Whoops. And this brings us to Zeta Gundam. Zeta Gundam, Char rebrands himself as his porn star name, Quattro Bajeena, and some versions of the text explain this that it's an elementary school style name derived from the fact that supposedly Char has had sex with 4 different women at this point in his life. We know about Lala and Haman, and I guess the other 2 were one-night stands. The manga, Char's lead affair identifies his second girlfriend as a Zeon soldier, Natalie Bianchi. But Quattro is a pretty public figure, and pretty much everyone knows Quattro is just Char. It's a very badly kept secret, and he's now only disguised with a pair of Diva sunglasses, and for the most part, he no longer seems to care about who he really is. Quattro, over the course of the franchise, also gets his own clones that can be interpreted in a variety of different ways as a reformed villain or a mentor character to the main protagonist. And really, it's just anyone with a fake name and a pair of sunglasses that makes it kind of lazy. Quattro starts out continuing Char's red mobile suit quirk, and this makes a lot of people identify him openly as the Red Comet at the start of the series because he uses a red Rick Diaz. But later, the red Rick Diaz becomes mass-produced, and then he switches over to the solid gold Hyakushiki, which also becomes a defining trait for future Quattro clones. He eventually takes over the AU through a combination of rising up through the ranks to the fact that a lot of the people at the head of the AU were assassinated, and then he uses the AU to confront Haman and Skirako, ends the Grips War, and then he disappears again. Char was supposed to appear in Double Zeta, but he doesn't. Supposedly in Double Zeta, Char had run off with the Princess Minerva Zabi and used her as a political lever to establish his own Neo-Zeon, which eventually became a thing, bringing us to CCA. CCA is the third and final phase of the original Char, where he becomes a godlike dictator, worshipped by the people of Zeon, except despite that, he doesn't really care. He is at this point bizarrely obsessed with settling his duel with Amuro, and whether or not he's doing the right thing in life. Char's actions in CCA can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. He seems to be doubting himself, and in many cases, he seems to almost be begging Amuro to defeat him. Another big aspect of CCA Char is this is the first Char that has an inappropriate relationship with a younger girl, Quest, although technically, by all accounts, he had to have started dating Haman when she was a teenager and he was a middle-aged man. But anyway, we see this on full display with Quest, and Quest is what really gave Char a bad reputation as a pedo. The two of them never really did anything together romantically, but Char clearly just wanted her as a soldier in his military, whereas Quest straight up wanted a full-blown romantic sexual relationship with Char. He was in the wrong for screwing with her head and probably getting involved with her at all, which is something he kind of realized just before he died, and without having a chance to address it. Anyway, since the death of the original Char, Char has gone on to become such a fan favorite that throughout Gundam history, he's inspired all these different characters who have gone on to be referred to as Char Clones. These characters have similar traits with Char, such as the red mobile suit, the charisma, the rivalry, and sometimes these characters go on to become their own characters in their own right, but for the most part, a lot of them are too derivative of Char to be seen as anything more than a Char clone. Also, while most of the classic shows will try to keep it to just one Char clone, in the past decade or so, occasionally there's shows with 2 or more Char clones just to keep you on your toes and keep you guessing. So yeah, for the rest of this video, I'm just going to go over every single Char clone I can think of, every one I think is worth mentioning, and I'll award all these Char clones some cards about whether they were actually a clone of the original Char, Quattro Bajeena, or CCA Char. And to really do this right, we have to go over literally every show that didn't have the original Char in it, and the first one of those is Double Zeta. Double Zeta has some vague referential characters like Mashmer. Mashmer has a ton of Char's tropes, like he's an ace rival Zaku pilot, he has a thing for Haman, but the real #1 Char clone of Double Zeta is Glenn Toto, a man who leads a second Zeon faction, manipulates an underage Peru army, and has blonde hair. Glemmy in the canon is rumored to be a clone or a distant relation of Giran Zabi. I don't buy the clone angle because honestly he looks nothing like Giran. I'd be more inclined to believe he was like a love child with Giran's secretary from the movie, but either way he died before his backstory was ever really cleared up. Glemmy is ironically the first and a literal clone of Char though, because ZZ was supposed to end with Char's Neo Zeon showing up at the end to face off against Hamon, but this plan was sidelined when CCA was greenlit, and so Glemmy was thrown in as a last-second replacement for Char. Despite being a last-second replacement, he's ultimately not that compelling and ultimately not that different from Char though. So Glemmy, kind of a big failure. I guess he's a clone of CCA Char. Next up is the first literal Char clone, Afranchi Char, the Char from Gaia Gear. Written in 1987 after CCA, Gaia Gear was a futuristic timeline where a clone of Char is made through genetic engineering to lead the Space Noids to greatness again. However, this clone of Char has his own identity and has to level with whether or not he's going to embrace Char's legacy. Anyway, Gaia Gear is unfortunately no longer canon, but very interestingly, a large number of his concepts, like the Manhunters, were later recycled into Hathaway's Flash. And ironically, I'd say the idea of cloning Char kind of started in this novel and later spread throughout the UC timeline, with Full Frontal from Gundam UC also having aspects of Afranchi Char. So the next show we really have to talk about is Gundam 0080. 0080, you might be thinking, doesn't have a max villain, and you'd be completely right about that. However, what it does have is Bernard Wiseman. Bernard is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Zeon pilot who pilots a customized Zaku, wore sunglasses at one point, and also lied about his identity to at least a couple of people. Now, since Bernie is a good guy and wears sunglasses, you can consider him more of a Quattro clone than a Char clone, but nonetheless, he's got enough traits in common with Char to make him categorized as a clone. Next up, we go to Gundam F91, which introduces Iron Mask Kurozo. Iron Mask is your first full-blown insane Char clone. Now, this dude probably could have used some more screen time. If he had, I think he would have been up there with Rao and Prospera as a misogynistic dictator who vowed to keep his head in an iron mask after a failed assassination attempt, and vows that he won't take off the mask until he establishes the Empire of Cosmo Babylonia. Kurozo is just straight up crazy and prone to fits of mass genocide with his bit machines. Kurozo was also an artificial new type, which made him even more crazy, and he was eventually killed by himself by failing to pilot the Fleischer well. All I have to say about Kurozo in the end is I wonder how this dude ate, and he was a clone of the original Char. Next up, we come to Stardust Memory, where we get Anna Volgado. So Anna Volgado has a couple of things in common with the original Char. He's blonde, he's a Zeon captain, he wears the same outfit as Char, just not in red. He's the main character's rival, he somehow had sex with the main character's girlfriend, although that was a very convoluted plot twist and it felt a lot like a retcon. Also, in the first episode or so, he borderline gives Ko piloting advice because Ko was such a bad pilot at that time. Despite that all though, I think Gado does a lot to stand on his own, so I have a lot of respect for Anna Volgado as a character. Do we also need to include Kelly Leisner because he was blonde and he piloted a red machine? I don't know, he's too less important. Alright, let's go on to Victory Gundam now. Now, Victory Gundam was a show where Tomino really stretched his creative limits, and I would say Victory Gundam is kind of a masterpiece in terms of being a tragic anime. Someone pointed out to me recently that Uso may or may not have been Char Aznable's grandson, so would that make Uso the Char clone? I don't know. Either way, Uso has one of the highest Gundam pilot kill counts in the high 100s. The actual only Char clone in Victory Gundam is Chronicle Asher, a ridiculous ginger European man who wears a white baklava mask, which he says he has to wear because he's allergic to something. Now, Asher kind of outright sucks. His allergy mask, baklava, strangely more believable than half the masks on this list, like, wow, just decided to live his life 24/7 in a Mardi Gras mask. Aside from that though, Asher just kind of exists in the story to subvert the Char trope and be manipulated by Bajeena, who was the true enemy of the story. Asher barely gets an original Char card. After this, we go on to G Gundam. G Gundam is not only our first story with 2 Char clones, but technically 3. The first biggest one is Alube Ishikawa, a former Gundam fighter who turns into a man in an iron mask. The mask is apparently there to slow the infection of DG cells he got fighting the Devil Gundam, and also to hide it from his coworkers. I'm surprised those coworkers never called him out on the fact that he showed up to work one day wearing an iron mask. But yeah, the DG cells inside him eventually drive him insane, and eventually make him think he can conquer the universe. So he does a bunch of weird stuff in the Devil Gundam, and eventually he gets killed for it. Then we have Master Asia. Master Asia is the show's second Char clone, seemingly having some minor Quattro vibes as an ally mentor turned evil, and serving as Domon's only true rival in the show. When Master Asia dies at the end of the show, he basically reveals that he had pretty much the same motivation as CCA Char to purge the Earth of impurities with the Devil Gundam and all that. Lastly, I nearly forgot about this guy, but a lot of people also consider Schwartz Bruder to be a Char clone. Now, alright, he's an evil brother, so that's a check. He's wearing a mask, that's a check. And he's a strong rival character, so yeah, he's got 3 checks on his list. So, sure, this guy is technically an original Char clone as well, so G Gundam kind of just went all out. Next up, Gundam Wing. Gundam Wing has Zex. Did you know Xena loves Zex? Anyway, Zex is probably our first clone on the list that dips aggressively back into everything that worked about the original Char. He's got the red outfit, he's got the mask, he's the estranged brother of the main character's girlfriend, and he's also the prince of a dead kingdom, giving himself the kingdomless prince trope that only so far the original Char has managed to have up to now. Zex's arc is very interesting because in Gundam Wing, Zex basically goes through Char's entire character arc in 1 year. He does the mass rival thing, he does the reluctant ally thing, and in the end he does the genocidal dictator thing. He just does it really fast and in the course of 1 year. And I guess he has sort of a better relationship with his sister than Char did. Also, his final mobile suit is the Epion, which is sort of red. Anyway, since Zex did Char's entire storyline, I think this makes him the only character on this list who's going to get all 3 Char cards. Although after the fact, he did do his own thing and settle down with Noin, making him the rare Char clone that has a happy ending. After Gundam Wing, the OFMS team came out. In that series, the character with the most Char tropes is unfortunately Genius Sahalin, the engineer from a wealthy Zeon family who builds the Apsalis. He has blonde hair, he has a complicated brother-sister relationship. That's about as far as it goes for him, but he is the final antagonist, and he has enough Char tropes that I have to identify him on this list. Then we get After War Gundam X. Now, Gundam X is a really interesting one. Starting off with Captain Jamil in Gundam X, Captain Jamil has a backstory similar to Amuro, but in the show he has a role similar to Quattro, and he also has Quattro's sunglasses. X does, however, have its own Char Aznable equivalent, the ace pilot Lance Crow Darrell, who looks bizarrely like Trace Kushranada with red hair. Despite that, though, like Jamil, he also has mixed up Amuro and Char tropes. While mostly being a Char clone, he also has a storyline similar to Amuro's in Zeta, and yeah, he's mostly a good guy, so this guy also gets the Quattro clone card. After that, we come to one of my personal favorites, Turn A Gundam. Turn A Gundam introduces us to Harry Ord, a massive Quattro clone, the bodyguard of Queen Diana. He's set up to be the rival character as well, but he and Lauren really never have a decisive rival fight. So he's more like, he's like a rival, but he's not like an antagonistic rival. He's more of like a rival working on the same side, which again makes him a Quattro clone. I might be inclined though to throw a Char clone card to Corin Mander, who does rock a Char custom capital at the end of the show, and was more of the typical rival antagonist of Lauren. Moving on, after that is G Savior, but G Savior sucks, and G Savior, as far as I remember, did not have any Char Aznable clones. So that brings us to Gundam Seed, and Gundam Seed has Raoul Le Creuset. Raoul Le Creuset is probably one of the most interesting Char clones, so there's a lot to say about him. Creuset was a very subdued commander character. Originally when the show started, you didn't see him much, and he was poised to be this like new type rival for Mula Flaga, the show's pseudo-Amuro mentor good guy ace pilot. Now, like I said, at first in Gundam Seed, Ra was pretty boring for a while, but then eventually the show starts dropping his backstory and how fucked up and crazy he is. See, Ra's backstory is that he's the son of Al de Flago, one of the most fucked up characters in Gundam Seed, who unfortunately gets not much screen time because he's dead or something before the show starts. Al de Flago was pretty much a cross between Elon Musk and Jeffrey Epstein, a man so rich he thought he was above the law, a man who pretty much thought he could do whatever the hell he wanted because he had the best money and the best science. And so after the birth of Al's son Mula Flaga, Al was seemingly so disgusted with his own son that he claimed that his wife who had mothered him had somehow tainted his inferior DNA with whatever the hell she had in her. Maybe she gave him some kind of disease. Anyway, Seed was kind of lightly about racism, so I'm wondering if they were trying to say that Al was kind of racist towards his own son. Anyway, because of all this racist bullshit, Al decided to clone himself a bunch of clones a bunch of times, and one of these clones ended up becoming Ral the Crusade. Now, Ral ends up having this genetic defect where he can't actually live longer than Alaflaga. So Alaflaga ends up abandoning Ral for Ray the Barrel. And anyway, this all leads to Ral going batshit insane. So back to Seed. In Seed, Ral does a bunch of creepy shit. The creepiest shit he does is he keeps Flay as a human pet. Again, kind of a twist on the whole Char keeps teenage girls twist. And he ends up getting her killed with his nonsense. And then he eventually loses a grip on reality and in the end decides he's just going to be a spree killer. He ends up going on this really insane batshit rant about how he's going to kill everyone, especially Lacus Klein because fuck her pop music. It's honestly like TV gold, and it's one of the best moments in Gundam Seed, I would say. Now, you would think that would be it after the dude died, but Seed has another clone called Ray the Barrel, who is also a clone of Aldeflaga, and seemingly did not turn out as crazy as Ral because he had a better upbringing. By the way, in the side materials, there's another clone of Ral, but I'm not familiar with that one. But we're not even done because we also have to talk about Neo Roanoke, a third Char clone in Gundam Seed Destiny, who's just Mu Laflaga with amnesia, and once Mu gets his memories back, he goes back to normal. But then he pilots the Akatsuki, which is another Quattro Hakushiki clone thing. By the way, do we have to give Athrone a Quattro card because he, for a week, claimed his name was Alex Dino? Anyway, enough about Gundam Seed, I'm not a fan of it. After that, let's talk about Gundam 00, which has Graham Acre. Now, Graham is probably the funnest Char clone on this list. He's like the one you would probably be like most inclined to buy dinner because he won't try to murder you. He really leans into the aspect of Char that was just focused on customizing mechs, and therefore he's also obsessed with the Gundam. In Graham's case, he's so obsessed with the Gundam that he wants to own it. He literally wants to obtain it, and supposedly in the side materials, he does eventually accomplish this goal. In Season 2, Graham becomes the bizarre anti-Gundam vigilante that gets nicknamed Mr. Bushido by the media. Graham is mostly a clone of the original Char, but he's surprisingly a happy boy on the list of psychos we have here, so I gotta give Graham some respect because, once again, he's the only one I would probably have dinner with. After this, we go to Unicorn, where we have Full Frontal. Full Frontal is one of the most literal Char clones, because in Full Frontal's case, he was basically somehow a man who's been like given plastic surgery and like memory alteration to seem to be Char. He has Char's original voice actor, and he has a lot of Char's classic tropes on display. Full Frontal ultimately, though, ends up being a massive disappointment because in the end, Full Frontal is not Char. He's more of the idea of Char and the idea of what Char represents and what Char is supposed to be to the people of Zeon who needed a Char replacement, which is what he fundamentally is. But Full Frontal is weird. He's not Char Aznable as a person. He's like what the people thought Char Aznable was. And so because of that, he doesn't have any of Char's grand delusions or revenge or his petty squabbles over sex. Full Frontal mostly tries to lead the colonies towards this like economic boycott of the Earth. And fundamentally, that's less of a military movement and more of just a giant infrastructure problem. Anyway, in the end, Full Frontal gets into the giant Neo-Zeon mobile armor and dies when Bandager makes him relive the past 30 years in a single second and I guess sends him straight to the afterlife or something. Full Frontal gets an OG Char card and a CCA Char card because of the way he mixed both of those aspects with his embodiment of the Char public persona. And at this time, I'm going to give a quick shout out to Zoltan Akinen from Gundam Narrative. Look, this guy is not a Char clone, but at the same time, he was a second attempt at making a Full Frontal that failed. But at the same time, since it failed, this guy got to be his own character. But at the same time, he also ended up with a bunch of Char's mobile suits. So in the end, it's hard to figure out what the hell this guy was. Anyway, we're only in 2010 right now. We still have 12 more years of Char Clones to go over. Sorry, people. We'll briefly touch on Gunpla Builders beginning G, which has the weird Char Clone boorish Char, a copy of Char seemingly mixed with the character MD Geist from the anime MD Geist. Now, he's got the sunglasses, he's got the red outfit, and if you rearrange the letters in his name, you can spell out this bro is a Char. But yeah, this bro is just a Char. He's a Char and he's a bro. That's all I can say about boorish Char. Anyway, let's move on to Gundam Age. Gundam Age is not the most popular Gundam. It's got Zeheart Galette, kind of an interesting Char clone. He had an interesting friendly relationship with the show's second protagonist. Zeheart is also a lot like Full Frontal in that he has traits of both the original Char and CCA Char for his story arcs. At the end of Age, he's very much like CCA Char because he's got two young associates who are just like Guinea and Quest. Also, while Zeheart pilots the very Gundam-style Gundam Legolas, in the Age compilation movies, this does end up getting a repaint to the red color scheme that most Gundam rivals usually have. After that, Gino Reconquista, which has Mask. Mask, kind of a letdown, but I also fully respect that fundamentally, Mask is just a fucking beast mode psycho wearing a mask with a bunch of eyes on it. Now, I haven't finished watching the Reconquista compilation movies, and they're definitely making the storyline a lot stronger in those, but I'm hoping they give Mask more of a reason to exist, because in the TV show, he's just like this constant enemy enforcer who's constantly attacking the heroes but never defeating them, and you never really learn enough about him to appreciate him. I think he used to go to the same school as the main character, but again, for the most part, he's just like this rabid dog. Mask barely gets an original Char card. And this finally brings us to IBO. Now, IBO, once again, is a show with two Char clones, although not originally intended to be so. Originally, IBO was just supposed to have McGillis Reed, who was ironically conceived around the concept of LOL, what if Char was actually a lolicon? McGillis, though, is super disturbingly engaged to a 9-year-old goddamn girl. And sure, it's a political power marriage, and clearly it's there just to make the audience question, how the fuck can this be legal anywhere? But don't forget, this is legal in a lot of other countries. Now, ironically, this girl he's engaged to is the younger sister of McGillis' very good friend, Galileo, who McGillis sort of tries to kill, but he does a really bad job of it, so Galileo comes back as Vidar. Vidar becomes the show's second masked man, who's ironically also a Char clone, but also a Garma clone, because that's what Galileo was supposed to be in the story. But again, they both get their own Char cards, with Galileo being an original Char clone, and McGillis being more of a CCA Char clone. But they do have a pretty interesting entangled relationship in the end. Also, despite the fact McGillis is a creep and a murderer, he did at least seem to take very good care of his child bride, seemingly to act as a dad to her since she seemingly had no parents. But it's very unclear the full, depravity of their relationship. It's also unclear how exactly they initially got engaged. I actually looked this up, and the only material I can find online about it suggests that she was basically promised to him as a baby, with the marriage potentially being arranged either just before she was born or right after, as she was a newborn, which again is all kinds of fucked up. Also, from what I'm reading, after all the bullshit went down in IBO, after the fact, Almeria probably ended up with serious mental issues and was reported to be put in an insane asylum after the end of the show in the post-series materials. So fundamentally, I feel really bad for this girl. She just had a really fucked up life, and none of it was her fault. She was just promised to marry a psycho from birth, and I guess she became obsessed with him. So yeah, this brings us all the way back to Witch from Mercury with Prospera. Now, Prospera is the first female Char clone, and she's going up against Zeta, who's the first female main character Gundam pilot. And yeah, so far, Prospera has the mask, the political savviness, the evil revenge vendetta all down pat, and that's all classic original series Char. But unlike Char and Amuro, Prospera and Zeta are seemingly really, really good friends. I mean, they are mother and daughter, so. With this extremely weird dynamic, Miorine might kind of be screwed by all this. I don't know right now because there's a lot of fun ways Witch from Mercury Season 2 could play out, but I'm definitely intrigued that if Zeta does keep listening to everything her mom is saying, since her mom is seemingly now the villain, does that mean Zeta will also be the final villain? So maybe there could be like a crazy twist where like Miorine steals the Gundam Ariel and uses it to fight against Zeta, who would have like a boss unit. Also, there is the whole conspiracy theory that Zeta's headband does look an awful lot like Char's mask. But then again, Prospera isn't even the only Char clone in Witch from Mercury, because honestly, all the male characters in Witch from Mercury have at least one of Char's traits. Shadiq has the blonde hair in the world domination scheme and generally takes after CCA Char with his whole organized demeanor. But then we also have Gulj Turk having a red mobile suit custom. And Elon has all those clones, which at this point is maybe a Char associated trait. I mean, sorta. It puts him in a similar situation as Raul Crusette. So, yeah, that gives you a lot to think about, huh? Anyway, I hope this kept you guys entertained. Hopefully episode 18 comes out next week, but I think it might actually be a 2-week hiatus. But yeah, I'm super on pins and needles right now, seeing how the heck Zeta is going to react to being dumped like that. And yeah, I feel really bad for her once again. Anyway, leave a comment if you like this video, if you have anything to add about any of these clones. What was your favorite Gundam series? Which was your favorite Char clone? Yeah, let me know. I'm around. Alright, thanks. I'm gonna be working on another video now. Later.